Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Today we have a jewel among the New Mexico authors, Anne Hillerman. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me.
Well, we've known each other a long time. People who are new to New Mexico always know your father's works. Tony Hillerman wrote many, many books, started almost a new genre of Navajo crime novels, and you have boldly, since he died in 2008, you have stepped up to fill the gap for all of this worldwide audience of people who love the books that your father created with two characters, Joe Leaphorn and Jim Chee.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
And so you're an accomplished journalist in your own right. You did lots of nonfiction, but you tell me you missed these characters. Other people missed. They wanted to know what was happening. Talk to me about what you've done here.
That's right. Well, after my dad died, I guess I should go back one step. My dad and I had never talked about my continuing this series. And I think like a lot of adult children, I never really, I knew my dad was not going to be around forever, but I never thought of what would happen after he left. Mm-hmm. So my husband and I had done a nonfiction book, and we were doing a lot of traveling to promote that book. It was a book about my father and the places that he loved.
Well, hold on a moment. Is it this book? No.
It is. It is that very book.
This beautiful book, Tony Hillerman's Landscape, with your husband Don Strel's beautiful photographs of the whole Four Corners area. Yes,
that's
go ahead.
Right. So we came up with a slideshow of places that my dad had written about. And as part of that book, I reread all of my father's books. Oh. And I think like a lot of his readers, the first time I read them, I really was reading them for the story. But this time, as I reread them, I was looking for the scenery, and I was also paying more attention to the craft, to how he did it, how he built suspense, how he made us fall in love with the characters, how he made us care about what was going to happen at the end. So, as you mentioned, my dad died in 2008, and that book came out in 2010. And my husband and I did a book tour, and time after time, people in the audience, after they'd seen our pictures and heard me talk, would tell me how much they missed my dad's stories. They would say that the people that my dad wrote about were just like family, and then they would ask if Dad had any more books that were getting ready to be published. Oh, anything in his computer, anything in his desk drawer, and I would have to say no. And then they would say, I'm going to miss those characters. And after I heard that a few million times, I thought, well, gee, I miss those characters too. And so since I had written nonfiction books, I thought, well, I'll give it a try. The worst thing that can happen is that I'll figure out I don't want to do it, and that'll be that, but at least I'll get it out of my system. But I found that actually I really enjoyed writing about them. And so that was kind of the start of these two novels. The one that just came out, Rock with Wings, and the one that was out before that, the first one, Spider-Woman's Daughter.
One of the things, apropos your Tony Hillerman's landscape book, he managed to make the landscape, the places in New Mexico and Arizona, almost a character, a lot like other New Mexico writers like Max Evans and Michael McGarrity do. The locale is a character, and he gets the Navajo life and the mysticism and the stories behind some of these place names. There's so much that it's more than mystery, it is also history. And so your readers have a wonderful, intimate relationship with these characters, but they grow to love the places, too. But let's talk about your two, because we're celebrating the release of your brand new book, Rock with Wings. Tell us a little about the title. Oh, and I have to say, we're talking about mysteries. They're such gripping, thrilling readings, but it's hard not to give things away. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little about the book, about the title, and we'll just try to have people take it on faith that you can't put these down.
Oh, well, thank you, Lorene. The title comes from the Navajo name for shiprock. The Navajo name, and my Navajo is terrible, but it's Se B'te, and Se means rock, and B'te means wings. And the name comes from... there are two Navajo stories that have to do with shiprock and wings. And I think the one I like best is the story that the people were living in a place where their enemies were really getting the best of them. And so this rock grew wings and flew them to where they live now in the Four Corners, so they could be safe. And so that's where the name comes from. And that's one reason that shiprock is included in a lot of Navajo healing stories, and also in the Navajo origin story. So the name. My story is set in part in shiprock. And so that's where the name comes from. I had come up with some really terrible names, and I was struggling with it. I know there are some writers who come up with the name first, but for me, I had to write the story, and then...
It's your mom.
And then, so I was with my mom in the hospital, and I was whining, I guess, about how I couldn't come up with a name. And she said, well, what about Rock with Wings? And it was perfect. It was just one of those wonderful, wonderful gifts.
There's another wing aspect in terms of the Navajo deity stories. Talk about who lived up there and
Well, that's correct. In the Navajo origin story, shiprock was the home of two monster birds who would swoop down and pick up the people and then take them back up to the mountaintop and feed them to their fledglings. And so the Navajo hero twins, who were charged with ridding the world with monsters so the people could be safe, killed the parent birds, but they had pity on the little ones and turned one into an owl and one into an eagle.
And one other thing that you mentioned is it is forbidden for people to climb up there, because
that's right.
When yet another story, were not some people stranded up there?
Yes, there was a story after the rock flew the people to safety. They would climb down where the water was and farm and hunt, and then they would climb back up and spend the night where they would be safe from animals. And one day there was a terrible thunderstorm and lightning struck shiprock, and the path that they had climbed down was destroyed. So the people who were on the top had no way to get down, so they died up there. So based on that story, and the Navajo Nation forbids anyone from climbing shiprock. People still do it, unfortunately. And actually, Dad used that story in one of his books, The Fallen Man, a story of illegal climbers.
You also have a rock. Okay, so this is, the new one is Rock with Wings. Your first one. To your first fiction book?
Yes, my first baby.
Yes, Spider Woman's Daughter. And
right.
It was your first continuation of the Chee and Leaphorn things. But you have added in these books a female protagonist, this delightful Navajo policewoman, Bernadette Manuelito.
Right. Well, actually, Dad had invented Bernadette, but he had never really used her as a crime solver. She was always, when she starts out, she's a rookie cop, and then she gets a crush on Jim Chee, who was one of Dad's two main protagonists. And as the series goes on, at one point, Tony moves her down to the Mexican border, and she's in the Border Patrol. And in Skeleton Man, his second to the last book, she's doing pretty well. At that point, she has hiked down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon with Jim Chee and Jim's friend Cowboy Dashi. And while they're down there, she has basically solved the crime that took them to the bottom of the canyon. But then, because my dad was writing from the perspective of Jim Chee and Joe Leaphorn, there's a flash flood, and Jim Chee arrives and saves Bernadette and ultimately solves the crime.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Dad had used her, but he had never used her as a full-fledged crime solver. And I'm glad he didn't, because it gave me a wonderful way to get into the series and to give it my own voice.
Well, also, you really work on so many levels. Like with Spider-Woman's Daughter, Bernadette's mom is a weaver. So we have the image of all the weaving and weaving together threads, but she, as a detective, also weaves together these threads of these stories. And you have another great pillar of Navajo myth, because Chimney Rock in Canyon de Chelly is where Spider-Woman, where she wove the world.
Yeah, actually, they call it Spider Rock.
Spider Rock.
Yeah, they name it after her.
Of course.
Yeah, that's her home. And another story about Spider Rock, which I really love, is Spider Woman, besides being the holy person who taught the Navajo how to weave, also was a disciplinarian. And so if children were misbehaving, their parents might say, you better shape up or Spider Woman will come and get you. And the story goes, there's a line of white rocks around the rim of Spider Rock at the very top. And the story is that those are not really rocks, they're really the bones of all those disobedient children who got scooped up by Spider Woman.
Very good. Very good. And not only weaving, but also the other arts, the whole walk in beauty thing when she wasn't disciplining these wild children.
Right.
You know, she was bringing beauty and the arts to the people.
Right, right.
So when I think that it was a fan of your dad's who said, but I've learned so much about this culture. I've learned so much about New Mexico and Arizona from this. So you weave completely naturally things about Navajo myth and about contemporary Navajo life, and about I'm just entranced at how much I learn about strange exotic cactuses. There's just a lot to learn. So it's very satisfying on so many levels. But you yourself, did you have a moment of hesitation, thinking, my dad is Tony Hillerman? What am I thinking? How am I going to do this? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's most people when most people write a first novel, it goes out into the world and it might make a little ripple. And then people, their friends might read it, their family might read it. But I knew because of my last name that there was going to be a lot of scrutiny on this book. And so I think that was one reason it took me 3 years to write that first novel. I would get going, and then I would think, well, is this going to be good enough for all these fans who were so devoted to my dad? He wrote for almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. And that's like really the span of adulthood for a lot of his readers. But eventually I decided all I could do was the best I could do. And my mother, who was my father's first reader, was a wonderful resource to me. And she, because she was my mother and because she was just such a gentle soul, she never gave me harsh criticism. But I could tell if she would ever say, right here I was a tiny bit confused, that meant it needed a total rewrite.
Yeah,
that was her kind of the way she would talk to me in code. And I was lucky too, the editor who my dad had worked with for so many years is still working at HarperCollins. So who is the publisher of both my dad's books and my books. So when I submitted my first manuscript, she looked at it and she liked it, but then she gave me some really good ideas on how to make it better. So I felt, by the time Spider Woman's Daughter came out, I felt that it really was the best book it could be. And I thought, you can't dictate what people like. So all I can do is just give it my best effort and then hope for the best. And it was received very well.
It was definitely reviewed well and then very popular. And right. The funny thing is, with some books, a lot of people wait for the paperback. No. People want to know immediately what's happening with Brittany and with Chee and Leaphorn, and so they just run right out. Now, will Spider Woman, is that coming out in paperback soon?
It already is.
Oh, good.
It already is. They did a little paperback, what they call a mass market paperback, and then they did a bigger paperback, which they call a trade paperback. Yeah, and it's the same cover. So if people saw the hardback and thought, well, I'll wait till the paperback comes out, they won't be confused. Well, also, it has sold really well as an ebook.
Ah.
Yeah, I was surprised at that, but I guess, particularly for fiction, I think electronic publishing is really the wave of the future. Only problem is you can't sign them.
Well, yeah. Well, now that's another thing. We're speaking today with Anne Hillerman. She's on a whirlwind book tour with her new book, Rock with Wings, the second one of her Leaphorn and Chee novels. You are now doing book festivals and book signings all over. What is that like? What is that experience like?
It's wonderful. You know, it's so strange being a writer. Well, strange and wonderful because it's such a divided life. I mean, when I'm writing, I'm mostly just there in my office with my imaginary friends. And then when the book comes out, I'm all of a sudden, I mean, day after day, talking to people, you know, some people who I've known for a long time and a lot of new people I haven't met, but who I feel like I know because they were fans of my dad. And people have really, they've been very welcoming of the new book, and some of them have given me some really good suggestions too on how to, you know, what they'd like to see in the next novel, or little things they noticed that maybe I didn't notice. So it's been wonderful. I just had an invitation to go to Gallup in September. They're doing a literary festival, and they asked me if I would do the keynote, but unfortunately it's the same day I have to go to it's the very night I have to go to Alaska to get another award. So I'm hoping we can work it out because I love Gallup. And Gallup, of course, is really so important to Navajo life and to my books.
Yeah, yes. You did a lot of nonfiction. You do restaurant reviews. You did a beautiful book with your husband about Santa Fe gardens. And so you really just didn't go into fiction at all, but you have presided over and created the Tony Hillerman Writing Conference. So tell me about that. I think last year was the 10th. This will be the 11th.
That's correct. That's correct.
It meets in November in Santa Fe.
That's right. We're going to be at the Hilton, which is close to downtown. It's so interesting how life works. When I started that conference, my main idea was that so many people really loved my dad. He taught at the University of New Mexico for a long time and was very instrumental in helping a lot of writers. And so people would say that to me, and I said, gee, it would be nice for them to say it to Dad while he can still appreciate it. So that was why we started the conference. But then it kind of developed into being really a platform to showcase a lot of New Mexico's wonderful authors. And because I was organizing it, I also would go to a lot of the sessions, and I learned so much about plotting and character development and pacing. So yeah, I really consider that a gift from my dad to me, and now kind of a gift that I can pass on to other people in New Mexico who want to be writers, or people from out of state who want to come and see what wonderful talent we have in our state.
And you have now, I think this year, David Morrell will be in it. He's a wonderful writer, creator of Rambo, but also these Thomas de Quincey novels.
That's right.
And his book on writing is one of the best I've ever read, The Successful Novelist. And you have just a whole lot of workshops, and you can even have writers have their work critiqued if they sign up in time. And it's just such a gift. It's just a marvelous event.
Well, thanks. You know, the pattern before my business partner, Jean Schomburg, and I started the workshop was that workshop organizers would bring in big names from New York or California. And we thought, wouldn't it be nice to let our own big names, people like David Morrell, like John Sanford, who just moved here, like Michael McGarrity, like Kirk Ellis,
Doug Preston.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, Doug Preston, Hampton Sides.
Oh, yes.
All of these wonderful writers. Let people from elsewhere come here.
Yes.
And we discovered that a lot of our New Mexico writers were really so happy to have an opportunity to talk about their work and not have to get on a plane and lose a day traveling out and a day traveling back. It was very convenient for them to just talk in Santa Fe.
So for people who are interested, because we have a lot of aspiring writers out there, it's simply called the Tony Hillerman Writing Conference, right?
That's correct.
And so they can just Google that and find it.
Sure. Our business name is Word Harvest. And it's just wordharvest.com. And if they go to the site, they'll see probably more than they ever wanted to know about it.
Now, so you have two under your belt. When I spoke with you about the first one, you were going to see how they were received. Well, it's pretty conclusive that they have been received astonishingly well. So do you have more? Are you going to keep on doing this?
Well, yes. I have a contract for 3 books now.
Oh, good.
So I'm working on the 3rd, and as I'm working on it, I'm getting ideas for the other 2 in the series. Yeah. And I also got an invitation to do a book signing at Costco.
Oh, you know you've made it.
You know
when?
you've made it, yeah.
And the one in Albuquerque?
Right.
Oh, my
right.
God, you'll be mobbed. You'll be mobbed. That is wonderful.
Well, I almost hate to bring it up because I love our little independent bookstores. But I have to say, my publisher loved the idea of Costco.
Well, I just think you should be everywhere, and they always thought with e-books that it's the death of literature. But as a matter of fact, there are dedicated readers out there, and once you have a fan base like you do, they will go anywhere to see you.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, it's funny. They said with radio that television would be the death of radio.
Yeah. I always love that. They asked a little kid, which do you like more when television came out? Which do you like more? Do you like television or radio? And he said, I like radio because the pictures are better.
I love that.
So what has the reception been among the Navajo? They loved your dad. I know that.
They have been very welcoming to me. I think because there are really so few authors who take Indian characters beyond stereotypes. Mm-hmm. And my father did that, and I do that too. So I think that's one reason. And also, everybody likes to see places where they live presented as seen through your own eyes, where you see the beauty of them. And I think that's another reason that they've been very well received.
Well,
and one more thing. People like the idea of the Navajo people, as well as my mainstream readers, like the idea of a woman detective. I didn't know how that would go because that was a big shift. But I've had, I would say, 95% positive comments. A few people said they thought she was a little too bossy, but so it goes.
Yes, well, it's a fine tradition from Murder, She Wrote to, to the famous Miss Marple. It is. But what is the most endearing thing and so exciting is that because the Navajo culture has certain precepts and certain understandings, that to see the clues from that point of view, where you look for what is out of harmony. It is such a transcultural experience, and for me, it's just amazing to think, oh, you could look at it like that, and then it's actually spiritually really rejuvenating and refreshing for me to be given the chance to look through that perspective.
Oh, well, thank you. I think one thing that fiction can do is really put you in someone else's skin. Reading can transform you. It can take you to different times, different cultural backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. I loved writing nonfiction, but I have to say writing fiction is really, really fun.
Well, there are no limits. You can really do... stay with it. Yeah. The nonfiction is fine. What are you doing in nonfiction?
At the moment, really, all I'm doing are the restaurant reviews. And I do restaurant reviews for the Albuquerque Journal. I was doing them once a week, and now I'm just doing them once a month. I enjoy it, but I've just been so busy with traveling and with my other writing. But it's nice to keep my hands in. And, of course, living in Santa Fe, we have so many good restaurants. Yeah. It's probably the best
your job
journalism.
Security.
Right. Next to yours, it's probably the best journalism job in New Mexico.
Well, I agree. So you talked about how people love to hear about places they love. When you came out with it, you and Don, your husband, came out with the Tony Hillerman landscape, you started doing something with Rhodes scholars, not RHODES, but Rhodes, people on the road. And you allowed some people to come to some of your father's favorite places, and you told them about it. So what a wonderful experience ever have, because there are dyed-in-the-wool people who can pronounce the names and want to go there.
That's right. I discovered there were people who knew a lot more about my father's work than I did. They used to call the program that now is known as Rhodes Scholar Elder Hostel. Mm-hmm. And then they changed the name. And the people who were organized, I would like to take credit for the idea, but actually the people who organized the program got in touch with me, and they said, what would you think if we built a tour based around your Tony Hillerman landscape book? Because you talk about the places that your dad loved, and we'll go on a bus, and we'll be gone for 13 days. Mm-hmm. And they said, we would like you to come with us and, just talk about what it was like to grow up as Tony Hillerman's daughter and, share some of your own insights. And they also invited my husband to go too and talk to people about taking pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really wonderful. And we went, one place that we went, where I had been before, but never spent a lot of time, was Monument Valley. And being on that bus they started out with 4 trips a year, and then I think the second year they did three trips a year. So that was 7 trips to Monument Valley. And each time we went out into the valley and then into an adjoining area called Mystery Valley with Navajo guides. And every guide, there were 7 different guides, and every guide had different stories and different personalities. And that experience was so profound, really. It gave me even more insight into the Navajo culture and deeper appreciation for Monument Valley. And at the time I was doing it, I wasn't thinking of Rock with Wings, but part of Rock with Wings is set at Monument Valley. And it was really inspired by that experience of just being there. I just fell in love with it.
Well, you make us feel like we're there, but tell me one quick question. How did Mystery Valley get its name? What's the mystery?
Mystery Valley is full of Anasazi. Used to be called Anasazi. Now they call them ancestral Pueblo ruins. So I think that's part of the mystery. And arches and springs.
And the mystery is, of course, where they went.
Yeah. Where they went and what their life was like. We have some physical evidence, but we don't have any of their stories. We just have to make them up.
Yes. Well, you are born into a storytelling family and a storytelling tradition. I am so happy. I want to show, this was her first book, Spider Woman's Daughter. And now the new book, Rock with Wings, and aren't they beautiful covers? So I just cannot thank you enough. Our guest today is Ann Hillerman. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I'm Lorene Mills. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.